the difficulties, and there certainly were many, had to do with systems. See, we flew the first several flights without any cabin pressurization, and that meant we didn't have any air conditioning, no air flowing. That made it rough.
Yeah.
But we had very high temperature in the flight deck on takeoff, which was the XB-36 without the big bubble. It was
Right.
140 degrees. That was a dangerous level.
Oh, yeah.
But we survived it. We didn't jump around much. So, serenity. And as I mentioned, made good landing, first flight, other flight, no problem with getting up and down. But problems with systems and problems with structure. The trailing edge of the wing was much too lacking in strength in absorbing the pulsating forces of the propeller passage near the trailing edge.
Oh, okay.
And in the end, or ultimately, the entire trailing edge, that means not the primary structure, but the structure behind it, had to be improved. And in the case of the wing flap, totally replaced.
Oh,
Totally replaced.
is that right?
To the extent that the wing flaps in the final form weighed 6 times what they weighed on the first attempt to operate.
Is that right?
That's a big
Oh, God,
increase.
yeah.
That's tremendous. But there was no other way. The design people were just too optimistic. They were so optimistic that those of us that weren't even in on the design could say they won't last through the first engine runs. They didn't. It disintegrated. The wing flap
Is that
just
right?
fell apart. See, they were magnesium alloy ribs with, and this is hard to believe, fabric cover. Fabric cover.
I didn't know that.
Yes, fabric cover. And they weighed almost nothing. They had good static load acceptance quality in the test lab, but with no vibration. And similarly with the ailerons. Ailerons at the inboard end disintegrated. And that's very discouraging to the pilot because taxi out and set takeoff power, which we never did have happen, but figuratively it could have happened where set power and the flaps disintegrate and blow away during the takeoff run. That would be discouraging.
Rather.
Yeah, things like that. And
Small things.
There were, of course, many systems that had problems. And power plants, exclusive of the engines, had many problems. Too much lightweight ducts, or air ducts under considerable heat and pressure would rupture. And therefore the supercharging would end. You see, things like that. But flying the airplane, basically, no problem. Admittedly, in a violent crosswind, the B-56 was a handful, but every airplane.
Oh yeah, every airplane is.
Every airplane. Yeah.
Did the heat, other than discomfort, but as far as flying the aircraft landing, did the heat bother you at all?
On the first flight?
Right.
Well, we were all literally wringing wet with sweat, but as long as it didn't cause degradation of physical function, which it didn't, there was no harm. But we were trying to be careful of avoiding anyone fainting or something like that, and nobody did. So it was actually a routine first flight, and so were the several flights that followed. Yeah, and I've mentioned several times, we flew the second flight 6 days after the first flight, and retracted the undercarriage and flew about an hour and a half and went to 20,000 feet, whereas the first flight was limited to 10,000 feet, but we went to 20,000 feet without any cabin pressurization, so we weren't really testing much. So progress was made step by step like any program. Meanwhile, fixes were being achieved in the airplane's shortcomings, and there were also many incomplete systems because of purchased parts that hadn't arrived. They began arriving. So airplane construction was being carried on then progressively as the test program continued. And we flew full gross weight for the first time about a year after the first flight.
Oh, okay.
So that was quite a long stretch, but meanwhile there was all this work done, and a major part of the early test program was to test to measure the stresses in the propellers, in the blades and shank, and they were high, as expected. And we and my flight organization had been arguing ever since the original design that we didn't need 40 degrees wing flap deflection. Why not limit it to 30? And it was easy to sell that idea when it was seen that the propeller stresses were literally excessive at 40 degrees wing flap due to the distortion of the airflow to the propeller.
Okay.
So we got that changed, and that was a fix. But meanwhile, nobody had been thinking really, as they should have been, about stresses in the engine propeller shaft and the nose case. And our attention was gained though on that when a propeller shaft broke in flight while measuring stresses, and the propeller fell 15,000 feet, landed in a plowed field 20 miles north of Fort Worth. And one blade went straight into the ground. The other two, it was a three-bladed prop. The other two blades were not into the ground, and the propeller stresses were such an important matter at the time that the president of Curtis was here looking at the data. And when he saw that two of the blades hadn't struck the ground in this case, he tried to obtain permission from the Army Air Corps to take the two blades that hadn't struck the ground back to his factory, check them and inflate them and beat on them and make sure they're right and bring them back, and they've become the first propeller blades ever to have fallen 15,000 feet and flown again. But the Air Corps said no.
No, wouldn't do that.
Well, funny things like that.
Yeah.
See?
Now you had one flight where you had everybody bail out, didn't you?
Yes.
And you brought her in by yourself.
Well, no, Gus Green and I.
Okay.
What happened was we were taking off at a high gross weight, high for that time, for the purpose of measuring propeller blade and propeller shaft stresses. That required the high weight, and part of the weight though was in two big water tanks in the bomb bay, and it was jettisonable. And during the takeoff, just after takeoff, we began landing gear retraction with the big wheels. Of course, we didn't know they were big; they were just big. They were out there, and we began retraction, and we were maybe almost complete on the retraction. The nose landing gear had latched up, and the left had latched up, and the right was within inches of latching up when the right main landing gear retract cylinder exploded, disintegrated, Bendix. Huge, huge cylinder. It exploded. And that allowed or caused the right landing gear to drop from a point just short of going in the uplatch all the way to fully extended in a big swinging, violent extension. And it didn't stop when it got to the limit of the side brace, which was supposed to latch in and rigidize the right main landing gear. It pulled the side brace out of the spar and left the main landing gear swinging laterally free, and the huge landing gear component swung right in through the nacelle and ruptured the longeron, and much equipment, including fuel line, started to smoke and flame. But there we were, the right main landing gear disabled, left was up and latched, nose gear up and latched, and 5 hours later we landed with the water expended, dropped from the bomb bay, and with as much fuel depleted as possible, and with all the crew on the ground via parachute except for Gus Green and myself. And then we managed to land with all the landing gear down. We had the crew, before they bailed out, extend the left main landing gear manually, which was quite an exciting thing, and the nose gear. Had all the gears down, but the right main was swinging laterally. We landed and contrived a system of staying over, called it, above the right main landing gear, and we ended up off the runway as expected to the left in soft soil with the right main landing gear leaning out just a little bit. And we had landed with no brakes and no, well, number 4 was shut down because of the fire, number 4. And we had landed without any brakes, without any no steering, and no damage.
Is that right?
Yeah. And flew again next flight 3 months later with a lot of new parts, newly designed.
Right.
The failed cylinder was beefed up considerably and never gave any more trouble. And the side brace was beefed up too, because it shouldn't have pulled out as easily as it did, etc. So it all ended happily, and we were very much afraid, of course, that if we augured the airplane and had her burn up, say, which would be easy because lots of fuel still remained in the wing.
Right.
Within the program. So Gus Green and I would practice before landing on what procedure we'd use, and it was effective. And it was actually quite easy, and truly and totally successful in saving the airplane. And soon, 3 months later, the program would continue to ever greater success.
Right. Well, from what I've heard and what I've read, that was not an easy landing. You did some superb job on it.
Well, it was a testing, and if the right main landing gear had crept in angle-wise, very much probably wouldn't be able to save it, because our ability to steer, or we were steering with reverse power, reverse thrust, we actually felt quite comfortable, Gus and I, throughout our planning and practice before the landing, and in the actual landing. Right. Gus Green and I had flown together quite a bit over the years, including the B-52. Meanwhile, although I didn't know it, his wife, his dear wife, Mildred, had been pecking at him to give up flight testing because it's so dangerous. So within a year after this landing gear incident, Gus Green gave up the management of the flight operations department, and they went to service. And just a few years later, in 1972, he was killed in an automobile accident.
That's right. Yeah, I've read about that.
Okay, I ruined your day. You're perspiring as I am.
No.
But it's part of the job.